Good evening, everybody. Family of choice, as I always like to say, my name's Jill, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. I am so grateful to be of service tonight. This meeting fills me up for the entire week, and it's good to be home. Grace of God, I'm back here. And the good thing about being stuck for another 2 days away, although nobody's going to feel sorry for me being stuck on holiday, is I was forced to really think about what we were going to talk about tonight. Not forced, my higher power gave me another 48 hours to really contemplate what these next steps are about. Because these are the only two books I took with me, and it was raining. So I read them over and over again. And I'd just like to share with you where we've been. When I read how it works, it's very important to me because when I first came into this program, age 60, for the really came into the room, the in-person group I went to made me read this out every night, and I was not happy. It was during COVID. I was the only woman. It was the Whistler Mountain group, and they would make me read it out loud every night because I didn't get it. And so in my sarcastic know-it-all way at the time, I started to be quite dramatic reading it. And as I read it out loud and reflected on what I was saying each time, the words of these steps finally came alive for me. And going through these paragraphs again with my sponsor, we've been through step 1 to 5 last recording, and I highly encourage, if you're sponsoring people, to share last week's recording and then this one because they're meant to go together. And it's a bit of a different explanation of what the 12 steps are. It's a kind of an overview. And then I'm going to explain how this paragraph drops us right squarely back into the middle of step 3. Okay? So the first 5 steps, as listed on page 559, we did a big paragraph bracket around those, and we called those the own up steps. 1 to 5 are the owning up steps. And we talked about how these part of the process here was just opening our mind. So that's on the previous recording. Then we also have a bracket around 6, 7, 8, 9. And these are the cleaning up steps. So this is action and more action, no doubt. This is where we got together with God and we made this decision that we were ready, just another willingness step. We prayed on it, made a list, and then we went out and made direct amends when we were also talking about how part of not hurting others includes hurting ourselves. So that's an important thing to remember in that step when it says, and that's where we left off, as I had just been explaining, except when to do so would injure others, would injure them or others. Ourselves is included in the others. So you need to talk that step really through with your sponsor, not just study it. Because my experience is amends are very personal. So is your resentment list. And so are your fears. You may be able to share a general word like lack of self-esteem or, fear of not being good enough with other people, but your experience on that is going to be unique. The other thing I want you to really think about when you're working with sponsees, that when you're going through the list of things that you drink at, your abuse, relationships ending, all, political change, financial loss, those are all things we drink at. It's part of our story. And that's how we're cleaning up that part, but we can't clean that part up until we've done the foundation steps 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we've been 1 through 9, and now put a bracket around 10, 11, 12. These are the grow up steps. This is my day-to-day life where I have to conduct my affairs how I agreed to in the previous steps. And if I don't do these steps, I end up going back and having to make full step 4s. Why? Because I didn't clean something up. What happens when alcoholics don't clean up our side of the street? We build a resentment, right? So, those of you with long term sobriety, if you're feeling resentful about something, you may need to go back to step 4 and really talk it through with your sponsor. And it's more likely, I find, and I'm directing this because we have a lot of people in this room with long term sobriety. When you're feeling resentful about something, check and see if it's due to ignoring it. Because if you didn't do your growing up steps on a daily basis, it's likely developed into a full blown resentment, and only you're going to know that. And so that's where these group meetings or just going to study groups do not replace working with a sponsor. Or if you don't have a sponsor and you've been around for a while, just phone me and I can walk you through how these steps apply in long-term sobriety to the things that make us go back into our looping thinking. And it can also manifest itself, as we were talking last week, in all sorts of other outbursts or behavior that is alcoholic by nature. Gambling, codependency, you name it, disordered eating. We can take that looping thinking and direct it into something other than alcoholic drinking. Can I get some nods if that makes any sense? Okay, so tonight we're going to start. I'm sorry, I felt I needed to give you that backup. So, because this last recording and this recording are way too much of me speaking, but I want you to go back and reflect on them if you don't really think you understand the steps, or if you're coming at the steps after a long time of not doing them, it's a different way of thinking. Okay? So tonight we're at the bottom of page 59 and we're on step 10. And if you remember, last week I was also turning to page 107 and 108 in the 12 by 12. And this is Bill's update on these steps as listed under his step 12 chapter. And he's recapping the 12 steps. So step 10, continued. Now, what does that mean? Ongoing. This is why this is a grow up or maintenance step. To take personal inventory. Because remember, we've already done the inventory thing. And now this is just making sure that we're checking on ourselves on a daily basis. And when we were wrong, promptly, circle that word, promptly, admitted it. That is what I was just talking about. If you sit on it and stew on it, what does it become? Begins with R. Resentment. Absolutely. And then we end up having to do an awful lot more work. So this is basically, in other words, we're keeping our side of the street clean. Okay, so that's step 10. Now, he said in the 12 by 12 step, by this time at step 10, we had begun to get a basis for daily living. That's why this is a grow up step. You know, we're mature adults now, and this is how we conduct our life. And we keenly realized that we would need to continue taking personal inventory, and that when we were wrong, in the wrong, we ought to admit it promptly. The ought gives you a little bit of discretion. By this point, you should be trusting your instincts. And if you've been around for a while, you know when you're doing this step honestly or not. But the point is, you're doing it on a daily basis. Okay, now we get to step 11. Again, we're at the bottom of page 59, reading step 11. Sought, that's an action. We're seeking. Through how did we seek? Two things: prayer and meditation. Okay, that's two things. And when we get to that step, we'll discuss how prayers and meditations are different. To improve, not to start. This step 3 was where we made our conscious contact with God and turned our life, like that's when we came and made a decision to turn our will over and said, hey, God, as we understand him, you've got me. I've turned my life over. Step 11 is saying, I'm improving now my conscious contact with God as we understood him. So it's still defined the same way we did as in step 3. Bill, you know how it costs more to do words in italics. This is italicized twice on the same page because it's the first time it's really emphasized here that God is defined as the God of your understanding. Okay. And then it tells us a direction. We're going to do one thing here now. We're going to pray only for knowledge of his, and that's capitalized. So that is your higher power's will for us and the power to carry that out. So it starts off with a meditation and a prayer, which is basically your intentional and deliberate actions. Write that down. Intentional and deliberate. This is not I'm going to go and turn up at a meditation meeting and I might vacuum and do chores. This is when you connect and really reach out, whatever format you need to do, and say, okay, this is my deliberate and intentional furthering of the contract that I've made in here when I did these other steps, that I am going to have the closest relationship with the God of my understanding that I possibly can. And Bill, what does he have to say about that? And on page 108 in the 12 by 12, in step 11, we saw that if a higher power had restored us to sanity and had enabled us to live with some peace of mind in a sorely troubled world, then such a higher power, again, such a higher power, the God of your understanding, was worth knowing better. I love that. Like, okay, I opened the door, I got my head around God as I understand God to be, and where I've just been, that's exactly part of the intention of the trip I took, was learning more about spiritual healing the Mayan way. It was something I tried out, and some meditation and treatment and stuff where you were connecting the Mayan way with a higher power. And I had some interesting experiences, but it was conscious, it was deliberate, it's an action. Whatever you do, step 11 is a grow up step, grow up to meet your God. Okay? And develop that relationship. So he then says, the persistent use of meditation and prayer, we found, did, so this is a result, this is a promise, open the channel so that where there had been a trickle, there now was a river, which led to such power and safe guidance from God as we increasingly were better able to understand him. Floodgates open, right? It starts with a trickle, and I just think that's beautifully written. And that's at the top of page 109. Okay, so then we're on to step 12. So we turn the page and we're now on page 60. And step 12 reads, having had a spiritual awakening. Now I want you to circle that. Okay, so the first step, I'm going to break it down for you, this step. We had a spiritual awakening about which there was, this is now from the 12 by 12, from of which there was no question. So we are now solid with our higher power. Looking at those who were only beginning what? Only beginning to connect with God and do these steps and still doubting themselves, the rest of us were able to see the change setting in. From great numbers of such experiences, we could predict that the doubter, who still claimed that he hadn't got the spiritual angle and who still considered his well-loved AA group itself to be the higher power, would presently love God and call him by name. So the beginning of step 12 has a condition right at the very beginning. Having had a spiritual awakening as the, and I've inserted the word direct, result of these steps. There is no other way to get a spiritual awakening. Or the specific one he's talking about here is a very special type of spiritual awakening. Very specific. It's the opening up, and here's my own definition. It travels 8 inches from here to here. Step 12, the spiritual awakening, is where everything I've read and thought I've understood and such moves from my head to my heart. Because it's as a result of doing these steps. I cannot give away what I don't have. So I keep working at these steps until I actually have done them to the honest of my ability. And we'll get to that part of this in a second when it says, well, how do we possibly do this? Okay, so spiritual awakening as a result of doing these steps. So we can't give away what we don't have. That's what that's essentially saying. We tried to carry this message, tried. So for those of you who are sponsoring and your sponsees keep relapsing, it's not your fault. You're trying to carry this message. It's up to the individual alcoholic whether they're going to actually hear these words and put aside everything that they are drinking at, and they're going to get down on their knees and pray and say, I'm done. And they're just going to do exactly what we're doing. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics. Now notice it says the word alcoholics. And I repeat, as I did last week, alcoholics are self-defined. Nobody tells you you're an alcoholic. It's self-diagnosed. And we talked about that last week. And this is a long list of stuff in step 12. I think step 12 is like doing 3 steps, and then the practice of them is forever. It says, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So let's break it down. Having had a spiritual awakening, that was an action because it was a result of doing the steps. That's the first part of step 12. Then we try to carry the message. If you don't give this away, you won't be able to keep it. But you've got to have the spiritual awakening first. You've got to fix you first before you can help fix others. Don't feel pressured to sponsor and judge in helping other people until you feel comforted you've got the message that's best going to be passed on. But guess what? Once you've got it, it's your duty to AA to pass it on, as our responsibility pledge says, but it's also a duty to yourself because you're not going to keep it if you don't give it away. That's my experience. And then the third part, practice all of these principles in all your affairs. So we don't get to be bad, negative, alcoholic, self-pitying misfits anymore. Every day we got to dust off and put our best person forward, but we're sober. and we're able to do that. That's my experience. So what does Bill say about step 12? So we talked about the spiritual awakening. And then it says, now what he says, see, he's agreeing. Now, what about the rest of step 12? So of the 12 steps. So he too broke it down. The first part is you got to have this spiritual awakening from doing the other 11 steps. The wonderful energy it releases and the eager action by which it carries our message to the next suffering alcoholic. And finally, translate the 12 steps into action. Okay, is the payoff upon all our affairs is the payoff, the magnificent reality of Alcoholics Anonymous. So he's basically adding the next two parts of step 12 there. He's saying, carry the message to the next suffering alcoholic. That's the deal here. It was given to us freely. Think of all the free counseling we've had. We've had our spiritual awakening. Now we need to pass it on. Okay, and then this third part, the payoff, the magnificent reality of Alcoholics Anonymous is we translate the 12 steps into action upon all our affairs. So the whole world's a better place. You know, there would be no more war if the whole world ran itself on AA's traditions. That's my opinion, clearly. Okay, so we've rocked through that, guys. Now we're at the top of page 60. And I want someone to read that paragraph, please.
Does anybody want to offer to start at page 60? Many of us exclaimed.
I can do it if you like, Amy.
Oh, thank you, Sylvia. And then Susie, you can read next.
Sylvia, alcoholic. Many of us exclaimed, what an order. I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Was that all you want?
Yeah. Okay, this one's loaded, absolutely loaded. So let me break this down for you. Okay, so first time I went through these steps, I didn't say, oh, what an order, I can't go through with it. I didn't understand anything that was up on those list of 12 steps. I mean, it was just a bunch of words, and God made me uncomfortable wherever it appeared in one of the steps. And I just sort of looked at those in meetings and went, okay. I even had a resentment against the font. So, I mean, I just did not get it because nobody broke it down. And I didn't understand that what we're coming up with here is the triangle of step 1, 2, and 3. We don't do any of the others until we have our foundation. So let's just break it down. Don't be discouraged. There's nobody in here that's done any of the steps perfectly, except we all can try and do step 1 perfectly, which is to be rigorously honest with ourselves and give ourselves over to this simple program. Admit we're powerless over alcohol. Our lives are unmanageable as a result of alcohol. You can do that perfectly. And that's called absolutely getting down on your knees and giving in and turning your life over, saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm at rock bottom, 100%. I'm done. Only you decide where that is. And some of us need to keep digging. Me? I kept digging because I didn't understand the steps. Okay, so then he says, we're not saying, the point is that we're willing to grow along, very specific here, along spiritual lines. You're baked if you don't find your higher power. This is a we program, and the we is also you and your higher power, not just the fellowship. So I'm not talking about just turning up in church. I'm talking about trusting this higher power and saying, okay, save my life. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to trust in you. You've got me. And I'm going to do whatever's suggested in this book to stop drinking. And I'm going to walk this path with somebody I trust. And I'm going to stop trying to do it my way. Again, if alcohol isn't your issue, you can do these 12 steps on just about anything that you're building a life resentment at. Okay, so then it says they're guides to progress. Don't beat yourself up. Okay, if you've relapsed, you're sober now. And you're going to do your utmost, willing to grow along spiritual lines. That's again a condition here. If you keep relapsing, let's have a real conversation about getting closer to God. And that's being totally honest. Okay, so we can work through that. Then we say, here's the giggle, we're claiming spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. We're doing the best damn job we can, and that's enough. So if you're in early recovery, whatever you're doing is a starting point. Getting your head on the pillow, sober, is all we have to worry about tonight in early recovery. Okay, so let's go on with the reading, Amy.
Sylvia, you want to read just this last little paragraph, and then Susie, you can pick up after that once she's done. But read that through the ABCs, Sylvia.
Okay, I will. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we are alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Okay, so basically what they're saying here are the previous chapters. That's where we describe the alcoholic, doctor's opinion, Bill's story, step 1 stuff, really. The chapter to the agnostic, we read that chapter, and that was addressing anything that we may have a difficulty with, putting us between ourselves and accepting the notion of a power greater than ourselves. And our personal adventures before and after. And that was the relations that Bill's story and the different things they've shared in the previous pages to help us try and identify. So that's basically saying, looking at everything up to this page, there's 3 pertinent ideas. And you'll hear them referred to in AA as the 3 pertinent ideas. Okay, there's 3 of them. There's step 1 and 2 and 3. The first one is step 1, that we were alcoholic and could not manage. Okay, and I call that, I've written in paragraph or next to that, I can't. I'm powerless. Step 2, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. God can, is what I've written next to that one. And C, I've written next to C, let him. C reads that God could, and it doesn't say or, it says and would. So we know God can do it, and he will do it if is the condition here. He, referring to your higher power, were sought. So that's your solid step 3. B is you're opening your mind and you're going to allow this truly, we turned it over in A. In B, we're going, okay, lay it on me. I'm ready to take in the higher power. And C, we land with it. We could, and as a result, he would, because we sought him. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so what we've done there is that recap is step 1 and 2, all of it. because this next paragraph, and we've got time to start this, tells us everything preceding that I've just read is your solid 1 and 2. Because, and now we'll carry on with the reading. We're at the bottom of page 60, the paragraph going being convinced.
Jill, do you want her to go through all the way through the next big paragraph because that one's so tiny? Or do you
Yep.
want us to stop there?
Yep, we can switch readers if you want, or I don't, there's a lot of people on here, so, but I don't really care how we do this. I'm just gonna need to, it's a paragraph that needs to be read.
Okay. Go ahead, Susie, just that little paragraph then.
Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do?
So this paragraph, when you're reading the book with the sponsee, is the introduction of step 3. And that's why it's italicized. Remember we said italics, pay attention. Bill wants you to know at this point, we finished 2, we're just starting 3. So this is the action, which is that we decided, because we decided in 2, right? In 2, we decided that probably there was no human power that would relieve our alcoholism as defined in B before, but also in steps 2 said came to believe. That's the process of opening our mind. So now we're at step 3. We decided, but it's 2 parts, to turn our will, our stinking thinking, and I do this still today. I have to catch myself that I don't start to reassert my self-will. So it says to turn I'm turning it over to God. I'm turning my will over to God. And that is, and our life over to God as we understood him. And then it says, just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? He's saying, gonna give you some particular instructions here because he doesn't often ask questions. Does everybody see that? So he's being very clear in that paragraph. So in my book, that's where I've got the big arrow sticker, step 3. So wherever the step begins in the big book, in detail, I've got a sticker, step 3, step 4, and they're all blue. So I can easily whip in the book to wherever I want detail on the steps. So step 3 is found with the sticker at that page. Okay, so let's go on.
You want to go, Susie?
The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we were almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives were good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangement would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits.
Oh boy, what a loaded paragraph. Okay, I will try do this in 5 minutes. This is enter the director. Okay, the first requirement, and I've circled that. It doesn't say first thing to think about. He said it's a requirement. This is the first requirement, a necessity. This is a must to do step 3. So I've written next to first requirement, necessity. This is a must. Is that we be convinced. That means no more procrastinating, no more excuses for things that you drink at. This is where I'm going to lay that aside and say any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. You got to believe that. So I've highlighted that. So we're defining the difference here between self-will and our higher power's will. This is basically, I want a will transfusion. I just came up with that one. All right, that's what I want. I want to just take that out of me because my self-will is not to be trusted. My alcoholic thinking has got me into so much trouble over the years, but I don't have to worry about that anymore because I've had a will transfusion. I like that. Okay. On that basis, we're always in collision with something or somebody, even though, big word to circle here, my motives. Always ask yourself, if you are in emotional sobriety and you're worried about your thinking, ask what your motives are. It doesn't matter if you end up in conflict with other people, if your motives were good. You've even seen in this group, in the mornings, sometimes some of us argue about things. But if our motives are good, if we're trying to help people, then that's okay. We work it out. So what are your motives? And then it says most people try to live by self-propulsion. That's another word for self-will. Each person who's like an actor who wants to run the whole show. You're basically being the director. And that's forever trying to arrange, and he gets very beautiful the way he's describing everything here. And then I've underlined, and the rest of the players in his own way. Ask yourself, did you ever try to organize everybody around you to suit your own selfish ends? Did you ever create drama to divert from something going on with you? Did you ever try and live somebody else's program for them? Have you ever tried to judge somebody else's program? Have you ever, go on, the arrangement is yours to put the words into. That is when we take our self-will back. Every time we try to tell everybody else how to run their lives. And if you've got issues with that, I've been doing a lot of reading on Al-Anon, and they've got some wonderful literature I can guide you towards. If only people would do as he wished. The show would be great. Yeah, let me run it. I'm perfect at running things straight into chaos. All right? Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. What is that sentence? Come on, you guys. It begins with an E. It's 3 letters. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. I think that sentence is hilarious. That's the lie I'm telling myself. Everybody would be so much better off if you let me run the world. That's my ego, right? Life would be wonderful. Bill's getting real sarcastic here. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. Oh, yes, I've really studied this and I do know what's best for you. Ego, 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 ego. And then it says all sorts of things. We can be self-effacing. We can be, poor me, self-sacrificing, or we can be the other end of the spectrum where we're really angry. All these things, what are they? Okay, kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Okay, other side, mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. What are those? We're trying to examine our character defects. As with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. So this is all about the traits that we would like to have at the beginning: kind, considerate, patient, generous. So this is also, I think, warming us up from step 3 to go into step 4. that's just my personal read of it, because these are the first time character defects are listed. And we're about to go into step 4. So I think the next paragraph is important to read in first person. We're not going to get there tonight, but I want to give you each the homework. It's very powerful to do this. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a taste of how to read it, and read it out loud. What usually happens? The show doesn't go off very well. I begin to think life doesn't treat me right. Ever said that to yourself? I decide to exert myself even more. I become, on the next occasion, still more demanding. So I up the ante, right? And get more aggressive because we know it's a progressive disease, or I go the other way and I'm gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play doesn't suit me. Okay, so read it to yourself like that, because why I found like I said, I am not really a self-seeker. Am I a self-seeker when I'm being kind? Am I just covering up all my insecurities by being overly nice? Am I genuine? What are my motives? That is homework, and where we're going to start next week. Okay, that was a marathon tonight, you guys. I'm sorry I did so much reading personally, but I wanted to deliver those 12 steps to you in one solid block. I highly encourage you to go back and re-listen to this stuff and apply it to whatever's going on in your own head or your own life. And if you want to talk about it further ever on a one-to-one, I'm certainly available.